What's going on, y'all? It's JV. We're back on the JV show. Football is about a month away. We got preseason starting. We're well into training camp at this point. And to say the least, I'm pumped up, man. We got content rolling out all season long for y'all. It's going to be the best season yet on the show. New ideas, new shows. I'm pumped up. I hope you're looking forward to it because I've invested a lot of time in breaking things down and getting things right for this season. And behind the scenes, this past week, I've had the opportunity to go over a few notes and kind of build probably my biggest episode of this offseason. You know, May, June, even July gets a little dry. I'm not going to lie to you. We're kind of reaching for takes, but today I want to legitimately go over 6 teams, 4 of which I'm higher on, 2 of which I'm lower on, that maybe the consensus in the media is either too high or too low, and I'm going to try and balance it out, and it won't just be big-name teams. I want to give some credit to those niche teams, to those smaller markets, to really show some love for all 32 NFL fan bases. While you're here, go ahead, like, subscribe, comment, do whatever you got to do to support the channel. I appreciate it, as always. And without further ado, let's hop right into the episode. Kicking us off, the Kansas City Chiefs. Everyone's expecting the Chiefs to fall off this year, right? We have this weird thing that happens in the media. When we see so much success, we expect at some point for it to end. And obviously it does, right? After 2 decades, the Patriots dynasty eventually tapered off. But we're talking about Mahomes and Andy Reid right now. And as far as I'm concerned, the Chiefs are still the team to beat in the AFC until proven otherwise. 7 straight conference championships, Andy Reid and Mahomes. I'm not betting against them. Don't fix what ain't broken. This roster has proven time and time again they can battle through adversity, make the playoffs, make the conference championship, go to the Super Bowl, and win, even back-to-back times. Now listen, last year, 15-2, no doubt they were a good team. Was there a little help with the refs? Were there a few calls that mysteriously went their way? I won't deny it. But I'm also not here to whine and complain. I'm a Bills fan. I'm talking about the Chiefs with the Chiefs jacket on. I'm trying to stay unbiased here. And from what I've seen, the Chiefs are still a really good team with a really good roster. Defensively, they're still a top 10 unit in the NFL. They're bringing back the majority of their 2024 defense, which ranked 6th in points against per game at 20.5. And let me tell you something. When you give the greatest quarterback of this generation 20.5 points, he needs to score 21 points per game to win. That's not too bad at all. You put the ball in Mahomes' hands, he needs 3 touchdowns through the time span of a game. This is why the Chiefs succeeded last year. And I find that earlier on, when you trace back to the early portions of Mahomes' career and how things were running in Kansas City, it was heavily focused on the offense. You had Tyreek Hill. You had prime Travis Kelce. You had Mahomes. They were the focus of this team. And as time has progressed, as they've lost a few weapons, Tyreek Hill went to Miami, Travis Kelce inevitably has gotten a little bit older, and Mahomes himself too, the focus has shifted over to the defense, I found. I think Mahomes is asked to do just a little bit less than he was earlier on in his career, and at this point, the defense has kind of taken over. It's kind of giving that Brady and Pats vibe. You know what I mean? Patriots defenses were always really good, and Brady just needed to show up and execute. And he did. He was really good at that. I'm not taking it away from Brady, but again, this is a team game, and when you have a really solid defense that's holding the opponent to 20.5 points per game, hey, it's going to work out pretty well for you. So, listen, I know they didn't wow in free agency. They didn't blow the roof off, but they kept the foundation of their defense. Chris Jones, George Karlaftis, Nick Bolton, Trent McDuffie, they got their guys there that will hold down the fort, and everything around them, they will become a cohesive group once again this year under the control of Spags. Spags is still a threat for every single team in the NFL, right? He's still one of the best, if not the best, defensive coordinator in the league. there isn't a doubt in my mind he will have this defensive unit back in top 10 shape again this season for another consecutive year. That's who Spags is. That's who this defense has been for the past, 3-4 years now. So defensively, I think they check a huge box for Mahomes, and they alleviate a lot of pressure off his shoulders and give him the freedom to experiment, right? He knows he can fall back on his great defense, so he'll play a little bit freer, free football, and that's what you like to see out of Mahomes. Again, the greatest quarterback of this generation. Obviously, you shift to the offense, and I've said his name a few times already, but you got Patrick Mahomes. This whole narrative, again, Patrick Mahomes hasn't been a top 5, top 10 quarterback for how many years now? I'm just not buying it. I know the stats haven't been there, but last year, if you truly break down the situation, Travis Kelce was getting older. He lost Rashee Rice. There was no Hollywood Brown. I mean, yeah, he had Xavier Worthy. The run game was injured. It was bare bones for weapons and support around him. And I thought Mahomes made the best of the situation he was in. And again, the defense played a huge role. But listen, give me a healthy Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown, and Rashee Rice. Mahomes returns as a 4,300-yard passer with 35-plus touchdowns. Easily. Okay? Travis Kelce has notably taken a step back. Not going to deny it. That's the reality of the situation. They can't rely on Travis Kelce as a true number one option anymore. And that's not a knock on Travis Kelce. Eventually, especially when you're a pass catcher, age gets the best of you. It's going to happen. Travis Kelce is still elite at what he does. He is still the best option in this Chiefs offense. But he can't be pulling the sled, carrying all the weight on his shoulders. They need a new number one. That's Rashee Rice, in my opinion. When Rashee Rice was healthy last year, tore the roof off. Rashee Rice, through 3 games, averaged 96 yards per game, 0.6 touchdowns per game. If he plays a full season, which he's probably not going to because he's on track to be suspended for 2 to 8 games, he's the top guy. But if they have him for the back half of the season in the playoffs, that's dangerous. But back to Travis Kelce. Again, Kelce is still an elite option. He just can't carry the workload of the offense. He is there as a security blanket for Patrick Mahomes. He understands what Pat wants. He gets into open areas. He's a veteran of the game, understands defenses, understands coverages, might not be as athletic and agile as he once was. You ask me to take a pass catcher over him right now, Brock Bowers, George Kittle, 1,000%. All day long. Like, it's not even a debate. But with that all being said, when it's 3rd and 5 to win the Super Bowl, who's getting the ball? It's Travis Kelce. They just need to incorporate him in a different way in the offense. That's it. And he's preparing for his life after football, just acted in an Adam Sandler movie. Like, he's getting ready to go on his way out. But he is still absolutely an option in this offense. They just need to rejig things so he isn't the number one sole pass catcher on the team. And like I said, that comes with a little bit of time. But with Xavier Worthy breaking out last year, with Rashee Rice hopefully back for the majority of the season, if not that, at least the playoffs and the bulk of the important games, and then Hollywood Brown obviously coming back as well, that's going to be big. But listen, bottom line, I'm bidding on a quarterback and a head coach that have made 7 straight AFC Conference championships and just recently won back-to-back Super Bowls. I understand they got blown out last year against Philly. Philly was the best team in the league by far. There was no team that was coming close. All right? The Chiefs are still the top team in the AFC until proven otherwise. I'll say it, and I'll say it again. Forgive me, I got to flip through the notes here. We got a lot of stuff to go through today. So our second team here, we're going to pivot. New England Patriots. You've heard me talk about them, and we're doing it again. I'm a big Patriots guy this year. So my favorite nothing to something team this season is the Patriots. There's a lot of things to like, and I'm not going to be unrealistic with them. There are obviously still holes. Like, this team won what? 3-4 games last year? I don't expect them to make that Washington Commanders leap and be in the AFC Conference Championship. Like, I'm not going to be unrealistic, but I do think that the playoffs are an option. I truly do. I think that the playoffs aren't too far out of reach for this Patriots team. Don't count the Patriots out. That's all I'm going to say. Okay, do me a favor, don't count them out. Free agency on defense. Harold Landry, who's had multiple 10-plus sack seasons, coming off a 9-sack season in Tennessee. He's a proven veteran pass rusher. Exactly what they need. Milton Williams, breakout 2025 season with a huge Super Bowl performance, which probably got him the contract. Now, you ask a lot of people if they knew the Milton Williams name prior to the Super Bowl, maybe not. But if you trust Howie Roseman and his draft class, you should love Milton Williams. And everyone should trust Howie Roseman. Maybe they overpaid him just a little bit, for sure. I'm not going to deny. Obviously, like I said, I'm not in love with everything in New England. But at the end of the day, Milton Williams, out of a Howie Roseman draft class in Philly, that's a recipe for success. And then obviously, Robert Spillane ranked 3rd in run defense grade last year. Exactly what the Patriots needed. They suffered in the run game last year. They needed a defense that could stop the run. Just didn't work out. They bring in Robert Spillane. He'll help with that. With the linebackers, the front seven has vastly improved when you compare last year's and this year's front seven for the Patriots. And then obviously Carlton Davis, who will provide that security blanket up on the opposing side of Christian Gonzalez. So that's all great, right? The free agency additions. But oftentimes we look at seasons at a statistical standpoint, and the Patriots obviously suffered last year, right? But what's the why? Why did they suffer? Well, first of all, they had a first-time head coach, Gerard Mayo, which it just wasn't working out. I didn't appreciate that the way they handled the situation, right? They kind of just booted him out. But with that being said, he wasn't prepared for a head coach role. Shouldn't have put him there in the first place. Mike Vrabel was obviously the guy they were going after. But the big reason the run game suffered and was so bad last year, they were missing Christian Barmore for the entire season. He had 8.5 sacks in 2023 and only played 4 games last year. Pardon me, Christian Barmore. They were missing Christian Barmore last year. So, again, these are big-name guys that you expect and you prepare as a head coach to have in your lineup, and when they're out and when you don't have them to your availability, it's like, okay, we're going to suffer a little bit. So picture this, right? Christian Barmore, Milton Williams on the interior of the defensive line, Robert Spillane. They clearly went out, adjusted, and made additions to help out this run game, to help out the run defense, and help clog up the middle with a few big interior defensive linemen and a veteran linebacker that can get the job done. And on top of that, obviously, you got Vrabel, who came in, defensive mind, used to play for the team. He's got the new mentality set up for the team. Carlton Davis, Christian Gonzalez. There are pieces on this defense that you can really, really fall in love with. I think the defense returns to top 10 form this season. And, you know, I encourage you to stop looking at last year so much and look at the improvements of this season that the Patriots made. And, you know, the addition of Mike Vrabel, don't let that fly under the radar either for this defense. It is huge. I think this defense will take massive strides this year, and they fall into that top 10 conversation for me. Offensively is where you have your concerns. For me, every single offensive position on the Patriots experienced an upgrade this offseason. Okay? Stephon Diggs is the biggest weapon the Patriots have had since Gronk with Tom Brady. He is, okay? And again, it all starts with Drake May. This isn't the Stephon Diggs show unless Drake May can show up. But listen, Drake May has so much promise in his future, and he's a versatile quarterback, right? I had Deshaun actually mention to me he reminds him of a baby Josh Allen. And when you look at how he plays in his stats, it kind of mirrors Josh Allen, who was the MVP last season. 420 yards on the ground last year through 12 games. He had a monster yards per carry, and I believe he only had one designed run. He makes things happen on the ground, through the air. He has a great arm, and his stats, considering the players he played with, considering the situation in New England that he was thrusted into, they were really, really solid. And like I said, I thought every position group experienced an upgrade, whether that's running backs with Travion Henderson, receivers with Diggs, Mac Hollins, Kyle Williams in the draft, offensive line, they added a few big pieces. Again, the O-line should be able to put together some great running lanes for those running backs. Okay, I've heard some analysts of the team talk about how great, and they raved about the run blocking abilities of Will Campbell, Morgan Moses, and Mike Onwenu. It should be better than last season. Now, are we talking about a top 10, top 12, even top 15 offensive line? Maybe not. But even if it's in the low 20s, 21, 22, 23, that is an upgrade, and we can absolutely work with that. Especially considering their schedule. The Patriots might have the easiest schedule in the league, and they can take advantage of that next year and really capitalize and win 10, 11 games, I think. And then the biggest addition of them all, and I kind of hinted at it earlier on when I started this segment on the Pats, Mike Vrabel is in the building. A motivator, a mentor, and really an important presence that can rebuild the mentality of this team. Okay, he's really the most exciting part, driven by the mentality. Okay, go watch Will Campbell's pre-draft interview. That encapsulates what I expect this team's mentality to be moving forward. I think the Patriots have a great shot at the playoffs this year. I think they're primed for a breakout. And if I was to pick a nothing to something team, it's the New England Patriots this year. Watch out for them. My third team, and here we go. We're going to talk about a few teams now that do not get enough love. I will tell you something. The media, they rarely talk about a few teams in the NFL, and I think they deserve some love. You know, I'm not necessarily sold on them as a playoff or even Super Bowl, win a playoff game contender, whatever. But I think that they've put together some really good position groups, some really good teams, coaching staffs, and I think they get some love. So we're going to show them some love right now. First up, Arizona Cardinals. Okay, I talked about them earlier on in the offseason. One of the most improved and young but talented rosters in the league that I've fallen in love with is the Arizona Cardinals. Okay, nobody talks about the Arizona Cardinals enough. Enough said. When was the last time you heard about any popular news page talk about the Arizona Cardinals besides maybe bashing Kyler Murray? Like, never, right? They don't get any news coverage. They don't get any love. But I do think that they had a really successful offseason. They went all in defensively. They had a mission to build back that defense, and it was clear it was a direct path that they made all offseason long. Now, last year, they were in the middle of the pack for defensive metrics, pretty much across the board, but expect that to change big time this year. First-round pick, Walter Nolan, might miss the beginning of the season due to injury. He's a premier run defender, and he enters a loaded defensive line group that will help mentor him and help his pass rush skills moving forward. Second-round pick, Will Johnson, probably the biggest steal. Matter of fact, forget that. Will Johnson was the biggest steal of the NFL draft. Cardinals got him in the second round. A lot of people I've talked to argue he's the best cornerback coming out of that draft. He seems like a natural starter. He fits right into the lineup. He's already making an impact in training camp. Watch out for Will Johnson to be a massive piece for this team, for this defense moving forward. Free agency additions. Josh Sweat, coming off the Super Bowl win with Philly, really made his mark last year. Had an 8-sack season, double-digit sacks under his belt 1 year. They added Dalvin Tomlinson and Calais Campbell to help that run-stopping game. Older vets that'll fill the interior defensive line to eliminate the popular and Obviously, great run games that they will go against. But I think, obviously, there was an emphasis here that was directed on this defense to build them up. Now, maybe a name we haven't talked about too often. Probably a name you haven't heard. Last year, the Cardinals traded midseason in 2024 for Baron Browning. Baron Browning generated a 14.7% pressure rate with the Cardinals last year. He could be the missing piece this season alongside Josh Sweat, providing pressure off the edge, funneling those run games into the middle, into big Dalvin Tomlinson and Calais Campbell to help out that run defense. I think this defense will take massive steps forward this year. I think it'll be night and day. And last year, it wasn't even that bad. But this year, we're looking at potentially a top 14, top 12 unit if everything works out like I'm talking about. And then obviously, you got Budda Baker, the leader of your defense, 7-time Pro Bowler, 4-time All-Pro. Last year, he was a Pro Bowler and second-team All-Pro. Need I say any more? I do not. I think this defense has a lot going for them. And they added a lot of both veteran and young talent that I think will mesh really well with one another to form a really strong defensive unit here in Arizona. Now, offense. Okay, I mentioned Kyler Murray. There are obviously question marks about the offense, okay? Yes, their biggest question mark is their quarterback. The most important position for this offense. Kyler Murray, listen, this offense goes as far as Kyler is willing to propel it. At the end of the day, that's the bottom line. If Kyler has a bad day, the offense struggles. Kyler has a great day, pops off, the offense does really well, the team probably wins. That uncertainty scares the hell out of me. And I'm not a Cardinals fan. So as a Cardinals fan, I would be worried. You don't really know where you stand with Kyler Murray. Is he the guy for the future? Or is this just a phase and are we going to move on eventually? That being said, there's a lot of positive around Kyler Murray to at least help him, and support him as a quarterback and give him everything he needs to put his best on film, okay? Offensive line in Arizona is an underrated unit across the league. Top 16 O-line, according to PFF rankings heading into the season. Really a solid unit overall that's seen James Conner in back-to-back years go for 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns or more in back-to-back seasons. Marvin Harrison, he has been excellent in training camp. Looks like a dog. Looks like he's improving going into his second year. Expect a breakout year from Marvin Harrison if Kyler Murray can stay healthy and deliver probably the year of his life, to be honest with you, right? And again, coaching, Jonathan Gannon from Philly. You can see the emphasis Jonathan Gannon has put on the trenches. Both offensive line and defensive line have experienced improvements over the past few years, and he's clearly making an effort to make the trenches the best possible in Arizona because he understands how crucial that was to Philly, both in their 2022 run and this year's run to the Super Bowl, and he's trying to at least replicate that and even bringing some Philly players over to make that the case in Arizona. So, listen, I'm not saying Super Bowl, I'm not saying even playoffs, but I think you're looking at 8, 9, maybe 10 wins on a good year for Arizona if they can get it done. I think they won 8 games last year, so it's not too far out of reach for this team. Our last riser up here, and again, another team that I don't think gets any love at all. Let me kick it off with this, okay? Winning in the NFL, it means different things for different teams. Okay? Philly winning last year, the Super Bowl, meant like that was their peak, right? But I think if the Raiders won like 7 or 8 games last year, that was success. That was a win for them, right? Like when you're at rock bottom as a franchise, if you can carve out 6, 7 wins, I think that's a success. I thought the Bears had a successful year last year with Caleb Williams. I think he showed a lot of promise, shattered all the rookie quarterback records in Chicago. I don't think it was the end of the world. And I think there's small successes within the big picture. I think there's points along the way to a Super Bowl that you can say, hey, we won this year. Hey, that was a small success for us, right? The Carolina Panthers, they're moving in the right direction. And regardless of the no media coverage, of the silence around this team, because really the only time I've ever heard anyone talk about Carolina is with Cam Newton, they deserve a lot more love. The Panthers could win 7 games this year, and I wouldn't be surprised. And I think that's a win for them. I think 6 to 7 wins, that's an encouraging season for them. And I think anything 8 or above is excellent for Carolina. I think that is a win. And when you're rebuilding as a franchise, sometimes you need those small wins along the way to build yourself up into a playoff team and then eventually a contender. So you're probably watching, you're like, nah, you're crazy. I understand, okay? Listen. Their defense last year was brutal, okay? I think they were like 32nd ranked in the league. If there were 40 teams, they would have been ranked 41st. Like, it was bad, okay? I'm not going to deny it. The defense seriously missed Derek Brown last year. He played 1 game last season. In 2023, he had 103 total tackles, okay? Last year, they were a horrendous defensive unit. So bad, they ranked 32nd going into the season on Bleacher Report. I think they're overlooking it slightly. Okay, I think the defense could be maybe a top 25 unit. And I understand where they're coming from. They suffered in the pass game, in the run game, couldn't put pressure on the quarterback. Everything that makes a good defense, the Carolina Panthers did the opposite of last year. But I think they invested a lot of time and effort into upgrading this defense during free agency. They didn't bring in any huge names or, stars per se, but they were in a position where they just needed to add players. They needed bodies. They needed new faces in the room, and I think they did a really good job of that, okay? Safety, Trevon Moreg from the Raiders. Big addition. Defensive end, Trayshawn Wharton from the Chiefs, playing beside one of, if not the best defensive tackle in the league right now, Chris Jones. Defensive tackle Bobby Brown. Not going to get pressure on the quarterback, but he will immediately improve the run defense, which, again, suffered tremendously last year. They made additions on the defensive line, specifically on the interior defensive line, that will help getting pressure on the quarterback, stopping the run game. Again, nothing flashy, but necessary additions to start building and start the building blocks of a top 15 unit once again. All right? Then the draft is really where they shine. Okay? Nick Scorton, who's 21 years old, by the way, this season. Nick Scorton and Princely Umunmeelen. Pardon me if I pronounce that wrong. Coming off the edge and putting pressure on the quarterback to, again, funnel the run game back into the big bodies that they have on the interior defensive line, which hopefully Derek Brown will be back for. They also got J.C. Horn back there in the secondary. It's not excellent, I understand, but you have to understand the Carolina Panthers are at this point right now where anything helps, okay? These small additions on the defense, they matter a lot more than you can expect. If the Carolina Panthers finish the 22nd best defense in the league, that's a win for me. I think that's a massive success. And with the additions that they made on the D-line, adding the safety, Trevon Moreg, Nick Scorton, the guys in the draft, like it's solid, okay? And I don't think that Carolina gets enough credit for their draft and for supporting Bryce Young offensively, which we're going to get into right now. Bryce Young dug himself into a huge hole last year. He buried himself in his grave. He was done for. Benched after week 2, which was pretty brutal, and he resurrected himself from the dead in week 8. And honestly, it was one of the most incredible things I've seen. Week 9 to week 18, Bryce Young ranked 6th in the NFL with an 86.1 passing grade. Can you believe that? I mean, if you told me week 5, week 6, that was going to be the case, and listen, I was giving Bryce Young the benefit of the doubt, but I just didn't expect him to revive his season like that with the snap of his fingers. He looked more comfortable, more confident, and honestly played free football, which it showed on film. He was playing like a carefree football, and it wasn't that he was careless, but he just played free. He was out there making plays. I think he had like 24 big plays from weeks 9 to 18 or something along those lines. Like, he was balling, right? He was much better and more lethal under pressure. That Eagles game is the first one that really comes to mind, when he drove them down the field and nearly won them the game. If not for an Xavier Legette drop in the end zone, the Panthers would have won that game against the Eagles, right? And the Eagles were on a heater for the majority of the season, right? So I think from what I saw from Bryce Young last year, it was really, really encouraging. His success and his ability to bounce back after receiving so much backlash in the media and even in Carolina, right? Because of the expectations coming out of the draft as the first overall pick. There was a lot on his plate. And I thought it was incredible to see him bounce back and what he was able to do with, honestly, a little bit of a lack of weapons around him. Now, the receiving room is underrated. Okay? Carolina's receiving room has a ton of talent. Ted McMillan, drafted this year. Xavier Legette, entering his second season. Adam Thielen, old but still really good and efficient. Hunter Renfrow, like, that's my guy. Okay? Use him properly. Hunter Renfrow is like that. I feel so confidently about this receiving room. We are, in fact, going to do a receiver breakdown at some point this week or next week on this receiver room, because I think it's extremely underrated. And I think I saw Chad Ochocinco go on about it, talking that it's the best in the league. Okay, pump the brakes. I wouldn't necessarily say that, but I think it's slept on. And I think Bryce Young has more than enough talent now around him, specifically receiving talent, to get the job done. Running backs, Chuba Hubbard, 1,200 yards last year, 10 touchdowns, plus Rico Dowdle, who had a decent season in Dallas, considering that situation. The offensive line is underrated in Carolina, okay? It's an efficient top 12 unit in the NFL. It's ranked 11th heading into the season by PFF. The Panthers are paying 3 of their top 7 contracts to O-linemen. They've quietly invested in a really good offensive line in the league, giving Bryce Young protection, adding weapons to the offense to give him all the support in the world, and I think it's showing, finally. The Dave Canales project for Bryce Young, when he took the job, he really wanted Bryce Young to succeed, and I think hopefully it pans out this season. But again, I'm not here to tell you that the Panthers are going to the Super Bowl this year or even winning their division or making the playoffs. Oh, pardon me, we banged the mic there. I just think that there's a little bit too much going on in the media of pumping up the main teams, right? The Niners, your Chiefs, your Cowboys, your Eagles. Let's show some love to these smaller teams that I think work really hard at building the right way from the ground up quietly and adding pieces just here and there that make the world of a difference but are just never talked about. So, shout out Panthers, shout out Cardinals. We're going to get into 2 teams that I just expect to take a step back this year. One of them doesn't make the playoffs, in my opinion, and the other, you know what, I don't think either of them make the playoffs, to be honest with you. It's kind of a game time decision right here on the show, but we'll get into them both right now. First being the Cincinnati Bengals. So the Bengals are missing the playoffs again. I'm sorry. I have no faith in the Bengals at all to make the playoffs. This is going to be the biggest waste of talent on planet Earth in NFL history. Joe Burrow is this generation's Dan Marino. Like, there's no better comp than Dan Marino. Joe Burrow is this generation's Dan Marino. End of story. The Bengals haven't made the playoffs since 2022, and they will be missing it again for the third season in a row this year. 3 stars cannot make the playoffs. It's already failed twice. It's going to fail again. Defensively, this is just absolutely shocking. To have the Triple Crown receiver and what should have been the MVP last year in Joe Burrow and not make the playoffs is so embarrassing. I can't even begin to talk about how embarrassing and sad, how poverty of a franchise it is, how cheap. It's disgusting. But anyways, defensively, okay? They're the 24th ranked defense on Bleacher Report heading into the 2025 season. Shamar Stewart already had a rough start, to say the least, with the Bengals. And the expectation as of right now is he fills in as the guy who replaces Trey Hendrickson. Because there's no Trey Hendrickson deal I see in the near future. No Trey Hendrickson means 17.5 sacks per season missed. He's hit that in back-to-back years, by the way, which is pretty incredible. Shamar Stewart totaled 4.5 sacks through his 3-season college career. 1.5 per year. The Bengals ranked 24th in sacks per game last year with Trey Hendrickson. With Trey Hendrickson's 17.5 on the season. Which was a league high, by the way. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, that is horrendous. But it's cool. They got Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins, right? No, it's cool. It's cool. 25th in points against last year. And they made pretty much no additions in free agency and the draft to help this out at all. Secondary's average. Front seven's below average. Without Trey Hendrickson, it's a complete mess. Needs a full makeover. Not just a new defensive coordinator. That is not the problem. Let's make that very clear. The Bengals do not have a defense. It gets a lot worse, though. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. The end. That's all they got. 3 players and Chase Brown on the odd week scored the 6th most points in the NFL per game last year. That's pretty incredible that Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins for half the season were able to do that. But listen, 3 players is not enough to make the playoffs. Never mind a Super Bowl. I think I said it, if you date it back real early on the podcast, when Joe Burrow lost in the Super Bowl, I said, I don't see a world where he gets back. Because this organization, we knew who they were. We knew how cheap they were. We knew that there was no offensive line, that there was no defense in sight. And now look where they're at. Offensive line is ranked 31st on PFF. The only reason they're not 32nd is because the Texans are going band for band with the Bengals on who can neglect their offensive line more and who wants to kill their franchise quarterback more. That's the only reason. No protection, no defense, just 3 stars on offense that cruise to 9-8 records and Hawaii for the Pro Bowl. That's all I see in Cincinnati. If there is one thing I have learned watching NFL football the past few years, it is that the well-constructed teams will always beat the stars. When you build from the ground up and you do it the right way, you don't overpay for a wide receiver 2 because it's going to make your franchise quarterback mad. You stick to business decisions like Howie Roseman in Philly. You will find success. And the Bengals have not done that. They deviated away from that. They waited to pay Jamar Chase. They waited to pay T. Higgins. They overpaid T. Higgins. Joe Burrow deserves his contract. I won't even go there. He's incredible. But You needed to invest in your O-line and your defense, and you didn't. And now you are suffering the consequences of it. Bengals missing the playoffs. My last team here, and again, another team I think just might fall out of the playoff picture. It kind of pains me to say it. Because, like, we're going to talk about it, and there's not much I can say that's negative surrounding this team. It's the Packers, all right? There is no NFL team I feel like more disinterested to watch this year than the Packers. I think the Packers are the Steelers of the NFC. Just good enough to get by, but nothing special. At most, probably a wild card knockout. We're kind of living off this high of Jordan Love beating the beating the Cowboys a year ago. And since it's kind of just been meh, it's kind of been average. Keep in mind, the Packers last year beat up on bottom-feeding teams and won 2 of 7 games against playoff teams. One of them against a depleted Rams offense that had injuries all over the place. So the Packers are caught at this really weird point now where they either take this big step forward with this, I would call a progressive rebuild that they've been trying to do. They drafted Jordan Love under the tutelage of Rodgers and kind of worked him into the offense without tanking and completely being straight ass, pretty much, or they decline. So it's one of the two. They either make the playoffs and make a statement and win this year, I think, or they just miss it. And I'm kind of projecting a miss. Now, again, I have a lot of good things to say about this roster. Honestly, defense is a solid unit. Top 12, top 10 in the league again this season. They have that potential for sure. They were 5th in points per game allowed in 2024, 6th in turnovers in 2024, 7th in rush yards allowed per game in 2024, 8th in pass yards allowed per game in 2024. Really, the defense is top 10 all around. Well-rounded, clean operation. I can't really say anything negative, to be honest with you. They lost Jair Alexander, but he's been injured with his time in Green Bay. I'm sure they've worked out a plan to operate without him this year. They'll be fine on the field, right? Defense is really good. The offense really is what just screams mediocrity to me. Bleh. I don't know. I'm just not excited about it, right? Josh Jacobs is still excellent. 1,300 yards and 15 touchdowns last season. That's pretty incredible. He'll be 27 this season. Still should have a few good years under his belt. Keep in mind, running back primes usually between age 22 and 26. Jacobs is just starting to get up there. Probably fine for the next few years. I'm not here to hate on him because of his age or anything. I'm just saying to keep that in mind because that typically is your running back prime. Might extend to 27, 28. Receiver room is really all over the place in Green Bay. Despite really having everything sorted out, the Packers have tried and failed to draft a wide receiver 1 since 2021. And it's been one of the most comical things I've seen. 2023, they drafted Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks. 2022, they drafted Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs. 2021, Amari Rodgers. They finally spent a first-round pick on Matthew Golden. Somebody has to pan out this year. If not, it's got to be one of the most embarrassing attempts to find a true number 1 option for a quarterback that I've ever seen. And then again, this is similar to the Kyler Murray situation in Arizona, although I would probably take Jordan Love. And again, I don't hate the contract with Jordan Love. A lot of people thought, it was way out there. Considering the quarterback market and the evident talent that Jordan Love possesses, the $55 million was warranted, I think, at that point in time. But again, with that being said, I I watched Jordan Love play, and the amount of times he puts the ball in harm's way, right? The turnovers have and will continue to cost Jordan Love and the Packers. This offense only goes as far as Jordan Love goes. If he turns over the ball in big-time moments, like that rain game against the Lions last year, it's a wrap. The Packers can't go anywhere. He ended the year really strong, but he threw 3 interceptions in the playoff game against Philly. So, again, there's not a lot of bad I can say about this roster, but I just think that they're good. I don't think that they're necessarily wowing me as a playoff team this year. There's a few other teams that I think have easier schedules, like the Niners, who will capitalize on that and probably bump the Packers out of the playoff picture come January. I just don't see it. And then you look at the rest of their schedule after Week 10, Philadelphia Week 10, Giants Week 11, that's fine. Week 12, Vikes. Week 13, Lions. Week 14, Bears. Week 15, Denver. Week 16, Bears. Week 17, Baltimore. Week 18, Vikes. That's a tough end to your schedule. And earlier on, it's probably just average from weeks 1 to 10. So, again, I'm just not super interested in what this team has to offer this year. I think the defense, again, good. They'll be good again. But if Jordan Love takes a massive step forward this year, the Packers will be really good. But I just don't see that this season. I don't think they have established a true number 1 receiver yet. And with Jordan Love turning over the ball like he has in previous seasons, I just don't know if I can trust this team. Until I see Jordan Love take care of the ball just a little more often, and until I see the Packers win against better competition and not make up the points in garbage time like they did for the majority of last year. Houston was the only legitimate game that they won where I was like, okay, they look good. Again, the Rams, that was a joke of a game. They were hurt. And then the rest of the 5 games, the teams were obviously better than them, that were ahead of them. Vikes, Detroit, whoever else they played. So, again, this isn't me hating on the Packers or probably, honestly, me hating on the Bengals. I'm not going to lie to you, but I think that there's a lot left to be desired with the Bengals and the Packers heading into the season, and there's a few teams like the Bears in that division that are slowly rising with a new head coach, with a revamped O-line, with weapons galore, that I'm like, well, maybe the Bears steal a game from the Packers, steal 2 games from the Packers, and they fall to 9-8 or 8-9. The Lions are still there. The Vikings, I think, are going to be exceptional and win the division. There's a lot of external factors there that might play into how this Packers season goes. But that's a wrap on our episode. That was 6 teams that I'm either a little higher on or a little lower on than the consensus of the media. I appreciate you guys tuning in. This was a fantastic episode. Again, probably my biggest of the offseason, but one of my favorites to prepare for, to talk about. I'm pumped for the season. I hope you are too. I will catch you guys soon here on the podcast, and stay tuned for some fantastic material coming your way. Peace out, y'all.